Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. Welcome to all of my foodies, my world travelers, and wine lovers of all kinds. Welcome to the Pour and Explore podcast. My name is Nick Elliott. I am your host, your certified sommelier, your chef, and your professional wanderer on this fun-filled adventure around wine, food, and travel. So glad you're here. The idea for this podcast came out of a series that I was doing earlier this year through Eventbrite, where I would talk to folks from all over the world about food and wine and cigars and travel and anything else that interested me. And I'm bringing it straight to you through this podcast. So I'm very glad you're here. My journey in the wine world and the food world started back in the mid-90s in culinary school. Now, up to that point, I was not a wine drinker pretty much at all. I would enjoy a glass of Boone's Farm or Mad Dog 2020 from time to time, but never had real fine wine. And once I experienced it, it was really an amazing transformation in my life. I learned how to drink wine. I learned how to taste wine. I learned how to pair wine with food, and just really, really loved everything about it. So after culinary school, shortly thereafter, I moved to California, to Central California, and really opened my eyes into the world of wine as well, beyond the food aspect, to where I started working at a working vineyard and ranch up in Central California in Monterey County. Got my hands dirty in the vineyard. I got my hands dirty in the winery, made some wine, some really great wine, which I'm very proud of. And that's really where it all blossomed for me. And I'm so glad I was able to do it. On Pour and Explore, what you can expect to hear throughout our episodes are interviews with folks in the wine industry, in the travel industry, in the food industry, of course, talking about adventures all over the world, talking about wine and food pairings. We're going to talk with people who really know their stuff and definitely want to have you continue on listening to us on future episodes. This is my first episode. I'm a little bit nervous, if you can't tell. I appreciate you being here. But what you can really expect is just laid back conversation about wine, about food, and about my adventures around the world. Today, we're going to talk about the basics. Today, we're going to talk about simple food and wine pairing and my rules, the wine guy rules on pairing food and wine. Simply speaking, wine and food are really better together. Yes, you can certainly have a glass of wine on a hot day or a cool day next to the fire with a glass of red, or on a warm day with a glass of white wine to cool you off. That's great. Absolutely. But I would argue that food is always better with wine. I look at it like this. I'm a huge karaoke singer. I go to karaoke several times a month, and I look at the pairing of food and wine like a karaoke duet. One doesn't really work without the other. The high notes don't work without the low notes. The harmony doesn't work without the music, and so on. And that is really the way I look at wine and food pairing. And really taking your food, your meal to the next level is going to always, in my opinion, include a glass of wine. What are the golden rules of food and wine pairing. For me, it's simple. I said it at the top of the show. Rule number one is you drink what you like. If you like red wine with fish, go for it. If you prefer to have white wine with your steaks, you know what? You do you. I'm all about it. But if you really want to drill down to it, we have a couple of more rules that I'd love to tell you about, which will really enhance the pairing of the meal that you're preparing or ordering or door dashing along with a great wine. So let's talk about those rules. The first thing we want to talk about is matching intensity. What do I mean by intensity? We talk about the body of wine, and on a later episode, we will talk about the wine tasting and really going through the different experiences that we get in drinking a glass of wine. But matching intensity is the first thing I want to talk about. So the general rule of thumb is light wines with light dishes and bold wines with hearty dishes. Some examples I can give you: a Sauvignon Blanc is great with a zesty salad or some cheeses or something on the lighter side, maybe a pasta with garlic and olive oil. And wines like Cabernet Sauvignon are, of course, wonderful with a juicy steak or a big rib chop or even a piece of roasted chicken. So that's what I'm talking about. Think about the intensity of a Cabernet Sauvignon with the intensity of a broiled chicken breast or something along those lines. That is where we start. Another thing that's important to take into consideration with wine and food pairing is the wine and the food going to be complementary to one another? In other words, are we eating sweet with sweet? Or are we eating earthy with earthy, mushroom flavors with earthy notes, things like that? Or are they going to be contrasting? Sweet wine with spicy food is a great example of that. I love a beautiful Riesling from Germany with Thai food, some nice Thai peppers, curry, etc., etc. Rule number three, what are we talking about? Complementing the food or contrasting the food? Either way, the most important part of that pairing is going to be the acid in the wine. And acidity in wine is really the reason that we are drinking and enjoying wine with food, because it helps break down the food. It helps you in your salivation, and it helps clean your palate for the next bites coming into your mouth. And speaking of which, we need to balance that acidity. We need to balance that fat. We need to balance the salt and sweetness. And that's going to be rule number four. Let's talk about balance. Let's talk about how that acidity cuts through the rich, fatty beet that we're eating. Or if you're having a creamy sauce with your pasta, how beautiful Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc really helps clear your palate to take you into the next bite to make it maximally enjoyable. So again, just to break it down, drink what you like. Let's match our food and wine intensity. Let's decide whether or not our wine pairing is going to be a complement to our food or it's going to be a contrast to our food. And whatever you do, let's make sure that we are balancing the acidity, the sweetness with the salt and the fattiness of the food that you are eating. Very important. Let's talk about a couple of myths when it comes to wine and food pairing before we really dive down deep into it. Myth number one, I talked about it earlier: wine with fish, white wine with fish only, red wine with meat only. Again, yes, generally speaking, it will be a better experience. But think about it this way: a Pinot Noir, especially a Pinot Noir from France with some earthy notes and high acidity, is going to pair amazingly with a nice fatty piece of salmon. Absolutely amazing. And we talked about that broiled chicken earlier with a nice cream sauce or a nice garlic sauce, blanc, something along those lines. A Chardonnay is going to be amazing with that piece of broiled chicken. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Myth number two, fancy wines are required for good food pairings. And what do I mean by fancy wine? Fancy wine, let's call that anything that you pay $50 or more for in the grocery store or at your favorite wine shop. No, absolutely not. I've got some examples of some wines here on the table that are all available on my website, and each one of these wines is under $30 per bottle. Some of them fall into the 15 to $20 range. So you do not need to spend, you might want to, you don't not need to spend a ton of money to have a great food and wine pairing. And then while we're on the subject, you do not need to spend all of that money to find great wines. There are wines from all over the world that are absolutely just stellar bottles that you can find for $10, $15, $20, $25. They're out there. You just have to know where to find them. And a great place to learn about where to shop and where to go is going to be right here on the Pour and Explore podcast. Stay tuned for future episodes. Let's talk about the 5 S's of wine pairing. Let's start with the dish. Let's say we are going to be cooking just a traditional steak on the grill. You're going to take the meat out of the refrigerator. You're going to let it rest for a little bit, come to almost room temperature. I prefer to season my steaks with just a simple salt and pepper. I use Himalayan sea salt and whole ground pepper, and then maybe a little bit of garlic as well. And that's it. You're going to sear it on the grill. I like my steak at about a medium rare. You cook it to however you like. And that is the dish that we're going to start with for this example. So I am going to pair the wine that I've got in my glass right now, which is called Chronology. It's from Sonoma County, and it is a blend of several different grapes, including Zinfandel and Cabernet Sauvignon, some other odds and ends in there as well. And this is going to be a great option to pair with our big, juicy ribeye steak. It was barbecued on the grill, a little bit of smoke, absolutely delicious. We're going to sip the wine first. We're going to make sure that everything that we want to be there in that wine is there, the acid, the fruit flavors, and of course, just the overall bouquet of the wine coming into our palate and into our nose. That next step is going to be savor the pairing. We're going to experiment taking a little bite of the steak. We're going to take a little bite of the wine and we're going to enjoy them together on our palate. We're going to simplify. We're not going to overcomplicate it, and we're going to trust our palate. Do we like the pairing or not? Simple as that. You might not like it. Maybe move on to something else. Or next time you make a steak, try something else. It's that easy. Do what you like. And then finally, we're going to tell a story about that pairing to ourselves. We're going to maybe just remember it. Some folks have a little journal on their phone that they take notes with. Some folks like me, I keep a little wine and travel journal right here for all of my adventures around the world, tasting different wines and enjoying different places. And I'll take a little note. Oh, this Chronology with that nice fatty ribeye steak, barbecued on the grill, medium rare. It was absolutely amazing. And then I'm going to be able to take that information with me the next time I go enjoy a juicy steak and I'm trying to remember what to pair with it. A couple of tips for pairing wine and food at home. We're going to get to the whole restaurant thing on another episode. I've got an episode coming up with a sommelier and a wine steward that works at an Italian restaurant nearby, and we're going to be talking with him about navigating a wine list. We're going to be talking with him about pairing a wine and food, of course, but in a very specific way during that episode. But let's talk about pairing wines at home, because most of us eat at home for a majority of what we do. And if you like to pair wine and food, this is what I would love for you to do. Let's first talk about what we keep in our pantry. Now, as a chef, I keep very specific things in my pantry. I've got some examples here: beautiful extra virgin olive oil, bay leaves, different types of vinegar, pastas, rice, quinoa. I love better than bouillon. I keep canned tomatoes and beans in my house at all times, onions, and of course, different types of wine. Now, you do not need to have a cellar or even a box where you keep your wine. You can certainly go out and shop as you need. I highly recommend that as well. It's a great way to find new things as you're out there shopping and enjoying. But what I like to keep in my wine cellar, just to have handy at all times, some white wines, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, sparkling wines like this one right here. This is Imaginarium from France. I've got some beautiful rosé from Provence. I've got some red wines from California, some Pinot Noirs from France. You do not need to have all of these in your house, but it helps if you have a little extra wine on hand. Just if you decide to make chicken one night or steak one night or pasta one night, then you always have something to pair with it. Go-to wines for every meal. As I mentioned, Pinot Noir is a great way to kind of span between heavier meals and lighter meals, fish and beef, chicken, pork. It goes with all of the above. Pinot Noir is absolutely amazing. Sparkling wines of all kinds. You do not need to spend the money on a champagne. You can buy a beautiful Prosecco from Italy or a Cava from Spain, or even a sparkling wine here from California. They're all going to do very similar things when it comes to wine and food pairing. So I always recommend having at least one bottle of each of those in there. And then again, pairing on a budget. You do not need to go out and spend 50 to 100 or even hundreds of dollars for a great bottle of wine. Some of my favorite places to get wine are, of course, on my Boisset collection. You can check out all of the different things that I offer on my website. I started shopping at Imperfect Foods earlier this year, and they've got a whole new wine component to their website. Imperfect Foods and Misfit Market. That's where most of this pantry stuff is from as well. I highly recommend it. And then, of course, your local wine shop. I'm going to be talking to Roberto, a friend of mine, coming up in a few weeks, who has a wine shop, and he carries some of the most stellar wines from all over the world. So I highly recommend getting to know your local wine shop owner, who will be happy to help you shop for the perfect wine for an upcoming meal. I hope I have inspired you to do something fun, do something creative and enjoyable with your next wine and food pairing. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you have to say. I want you to go out and get yourself a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc and pair it with your favorite salad. I want for you to go out and pick up some sparkling wine and have it with some oysters. Grab yourself a steak at the butcher shop and pair it with a nice Cabernet Sauvignon or Pinot Noir. And then I want you to tell me about it. I want you to go and do the steps that we've talked about here today and really enjoy the pairing. And I want to hear all about it. Hit me up on TikTok. Go hit me up on Instagram. Email me cheers@thewineguy.vin. I want to hear about your experience. And when you're posting your experiences about that wine and food pairing that you put together, hit me up with the hashtag Pour and Explore. All right. So with that being said, we've got some more great episodes coming up for you soon. I hope you enjoyed this one. We've got some wonderful guests coming up. I've got a cigar aficionado coming up. I've got several travel experts coming up. I've got some solo episodes. And in mid-January, I will be in the Caribbean, so I will have some on-site episodes coming up as well. So look out for me. I will not be in my Speedo, I promise, but I will be enjoying a glass of wine on the beach or on the boat, just having a good time and traveling the world just like I like to do. With that being said, what we say at the end of every episode here at Pour Explore, so glad you were here. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, hit that subscribe button, hit me up on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Don't forget to check out my website, www.thewineguy.vin. And please, whatever you do, keep wondering and wandering. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.